Hey peeps, how we doing? John from The Good Dog. Got kind of a foggy, overcast day out here in NOLA. I want to talk to you guys really quick about the tell. The tell. So, what is the tell? The tell is basically the same thing that we would talk about if we're talking about like poker, or you could really like assign it to anything. So, the tell is with dogs, you reading the dog and looking for the clues that are going to indicate where the dog's state of mind is at. Why he's doing what he's doing, why he's not doing what he's doing or should be doing, why he's stuck, why he's giving you a hard time, why he's not giving you a hard time. The whole thing, whole kit and caboodle. The tell is what's going to help you move through the process of training the dog in a way that serves the dog. Whether it's for trainers or for owners, it doesn't matter. Everybody should be working extremely hard on cultivating their feel, their sense, their touch, their intuition for looking for the tell. So the tell is something, for one, you want to look for in as many contexts as possible. That will give you usually your best clues. Dogs typically tip their hands without knowing it in a lot of different contexts. So, like, let's take the Tibetan for instance that we were working with yesterday. So, Cambry was struggling with getting him to do consistent downs. And so she's been kind of helping him out, a little leash pressure along with the e-collar pressure. And I said, how's he been everywhere else? How's he been on the walk? Tantrums. He's not doing any more, but there were tantrums. Okay, how about the sit? Oh, he fought the sit. What about other stuff? Yeah, he fought that and he was hard on that. Great. So there's a whole bunch of clues, whole bunch of tells for the big tell, a whole bunch of clues in different contexts that tells me, with the outlier being this down, that even after a good amount of time and a lot of patience and a lot of repetition, he's still struggling with, right? We're trying to figure out, is this dog confused? Is he bratty? Or is he overwhelmed? Those are the three things that you want to be really like looking for. So bratty comes from a dog doing what it wants to do and getting away with it, and then getting reinforced for that and becomes more and more bratty and does more and more of what he wants to do. Confusion happens when trainers move too fast and expect too much of a dog. So a dog is in kindergarten or first or second grade, and the trainer or the owner tries to move the dog up to 7th, 8th, 9th, college, boom, too quick, and the dog hasn't had enough time to put all the pieces together, and so the dog ends up confused, and you end up adding pressure to the dog and getting frustrated and annoyed. The other is overwhelm, which can be a byproduct of you working with confusion and putting too much pressure on, or it can be just a byproduct of how the dog is in its natural state. If the dog is super fearful, crazy anxious, highly stressed at anything, super jumpy, tough nerves, you're going to find that dog to be likely overwhelmed at just about anything, like even very slow, methodical, light, easy training might overwhelm and freak out that dog. Of course, you can contribute to that if you read it wrong, right? So it's super, super important that we develop our ability to see the true dog and read the tell, so we know what we're dealing with. And that can change. It can shift in different contexts and different moments and things like that. But typically, fundamental like attitude and personality stuff is pretty consistent. And so with the Mastiff, I got all that information about what he'd done prior. And then I started working with him, calling him around a place and things like that. And he was, resisting that to some degree, and like making us like prompt him to do stuff that he's had a lot of repetitions, and I know they're aloof and stubborn and all that, but that doesn't matter because aloof and stubborn Tibetans that don't listen and don't have any respect for human beings typically are going to not be safe Tibetans. So then I started asking for the downs, and he was like, nothing doing, just like this, staring at me. That is not the stare of a confused dog. That's not the stare of an overwhelmed dog. That's the stare of a dog who's got something up his sleeve. Now, when I added a little pressure and repeated the command, corrected him, I got this. Right? Or, but staring in my face, staring in my eyes, I should say, with a pretty firm look, moving forward and barking. There's my tell. That's not the tell of like, I'm not sure what's going on, let me turn around, let me see what's going on. No, there's no overwhelm, there's no confusion, there's no freak out. There's looking in my eyes, there's barking, and there's disagreeing with what's being asked of him from me. So for me, that's an easy tell, especially along with all the other issues that he's had, all the other contexts of being a brat and being vocal and like, I don't want to do this, blah, 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 blah. So that's a really easy one for me to see. And especially, like I said, his big tell, staring me in the eyes, barking and looking at me when asked to do something, that was just an easy dead giveaway. But with a lot of other dogs, it can be harder to discern where exactly they're at. To me, he was an easier one. But you can get dogs that, especially if you have dogs, so let's talk about like mixing and matching. If you've got a dog that's tends to be overwhelmed, has not the greatest nerves, is anxious, is freaked out, is fearful, and you're trying to navigate that, that's a really tough one to navigate. What can the dog process? What arc should we move at? What speed should we move at that's not going to be unfair to the dog? And that's a challenging endeavor. So in those situations, I'll do a lot of different things, and we don't have time in this video to get into all the different stuff, but there's a lot of different things that I'll do to try and kind of test dogs to see what they know. One of the kind of common tests for a dog that's had a fair amount of training or a fair amount of repetitions is if they step off a place, walk over it. You've probably heard me talk about whether we've got, how do I put it, a learning problem or a priority problem. And so a lot of times you'll see like dogs that will not prioritize the command. You're just saying place, and the dog like steps on it and then like steps off. Now, you could say, well, maybe he doesn't know that that place command is really a strict guideline or a strict boundary. Maybe he hasn't been taught clear. Maybe he doesn't know it totally. So if I've done a fair amount of reps with the dog and I feel like I've been pretty clear and I feel like the dog's brain is in a space where he should be able to pick this up, then when he steps off, I might add a little e-collar pressure and see what the dog does with it. Press, hold, not at a crazy level, just press, hold, and roll up a little bit and see what the dog does with the pressure. That's a big tell. If the dog steps back onto place, you got a pretty good idea of how to turn that pressure off. You just weren't prioritizing it. And getting a dog to prioritize what you're trying to do is a big part of the whole training process. So that's one little kind of like, not trick, but one little aspect or technique I'll use to kind of like work dogs through if they're like stepping off a place, or having a problem with a command. I'll add pressure and then I'll see what they do with it. Now, you have to do that within reason. That doesn't mean you go willy-nilly and just like add pressure and see what dogs do. That's bad training. What I'm talking about is when you've done good training and then you're seeing a dog consistently make a mistake. And if the dog looks, this is the tell part, if the dog looks overwhelmed and worried, you probably have an overwhelmed and worried dog. You might be moving too fast. You might need to take steps way back. If you've got a dog that's like, once again, the tell, you have to look at the dog, and the dog is like Prancy McNancy walks over to place and then steps off, right? And where's the face? Where's the face at? Face isn't looking at you. Face isn't looking at place. Just the dog's looking around. That's probably a priority issue, right? That's probably a dog that doesn't really give a crap about what you're asking for or what you're doing. And so you may need more pressure for a dog like that, or a correction for a dog to actually care and take you seriously. I hope that makes some sense. So I always say, with confusion, we want to help. With brattiness, we want to correct. But within that is just this wide spectrum that can vacillate and change. You can have confusing moments, you can have bratty moments that can go back and forth. And this is really where, to me, the art of training comes in. The art of training isn't really the techniques with the tools or the e-collars or the prongs or the food or the markers, none of that stuff. That's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is reading the dog and reading where the dog's state of mind is at so you can best serve the dog. And sometimes best serving the dog is correcting them for being a jackass, or correcting them for not prioritizing, or correcting them for not caring or doing their best work. So, but you can only do that, and this is kind of the important crux of this, is that you can only do that in a smart, helpful, positive fashion if you know where the dog's head is at. You can't do good training with a dog if you don't know where their head's at. You can't ask more of a dog if you're unsure if the dog is confused, right? Because that wouldn't be fair. And if you don't ask enough of a dog who's being a brat, then you're letting him get away with being a brat, and then things are gonna move in the wrong direction, right? So that's the art form, that's the beauty in this work. That confused dog needs to be helped. Steps need to be taken back, pressure down, reps down, whatever it needs to be. The bratty dog, he may need more pressure forward in order to get the dog to actually care and do different work. The overwhelmed dog might need a combination of both, and this is where things get really challenging. If you've got an overwhelmed dog, you may need to be extremely slow and extremely patient, right? But then pick moments where you actually have to add more pressure in order for you to break through fear, anxiety, things like that. I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying be willy-nilly with a fearful, anxious, overwhelmed dog and add pressure. What I'm saying is you might have to be incredibly patient, but then also read the dog and go, okay, the dog isn't doing its best, not because it's a brat, but because it's overwhelmed and it's listening to its fear, it's listening to its anxiety, it's listening to whatever noise or voices are in its head. And sometimes a little extra pressure will create, even over that stuff, a new priority, where the dog will prioritize, whoa, I can't listen to my worry about, is someone gonna walk through the door, or is somebody gonna move past that window? I better focus on this training. So that is where things get challenging, right? So for me, the Mastiff is a much more clear-cut, easy thing. I looked for my basics. Is the dog clear-headed? So I always ask all our trainers when we're working with dogs, is the dog clear-headed? If the dog's clear-headed, that sets a whole other level, a whole other bar. If the dog's clear-headed, I know that 99% of what's gonna happen if we're doing good training is going to be attitude, brattiness, personality issues, right? Because we're gonna train fairly slowly and patiently. Now, if you don't have your stuff together as a trainer and you push too fast, then you've got to worry about the confusion thing. So, hope that all kind of is tying together. So, this is the art form. The tell is what allows you to discern when to add pressure, when to remove pressure, how much pressure, how little pressure, how to do that dance back and forth. And it really is the magic of dog training, much more so than any other fancy stuff. Because if you can read the dog and you can read those tells, then you can serve the dog. And you can like I said, even with a fearful dog, even with an anxious dog, even with an overwhelmed dog, you can pick a moment where you use higher pressure, or even a few moments, and the dog goes, okay, I'm gonna listen to you, I'm gonna listen to the training rather than this stuff, right? Or you're so sensitive that you're aware that that would not work for the dog. And so you take a few steps back and you move slower and you do more patient, more reps, and you see that that serves the dog at a higher level. Or you experiment a little bit and try things, which is really what great dog training is about, is being open-minded enough to try things, because sometimes you won't know the tell of the dog or where the dog's head is at until you try some stuff and see what the response is. You can always step back and go, okay, that didn't work, let me try this. It really is a lot of dancing with the dog and seeing the responses coming back to you, so you can then make informed decisions based on those responses. So I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you guys. I wanted this to be like just a really simple thing about the tell, but it's kind of getting into a really cool part, a really cool aspect of dog training, which is the hardest part, which is the reason if you're struggling with your dog, you go see a really experienced professional, because then they can work through those issues and see that stuff if you're struggling to see it. Or you may not have a problem with that, because you may be one of those owners that has an amazing ability to see exactly what's going on with your dog, and you understand exactly what's going on as far as attitude, demeanor, overwhelm, confusion, bratty, so on and so forth. But a lot of times we see owners that don't. A lot of times we see owners that misread that stuff, so they don't know what to do with it. They get frustrated with a confused dog. They ask too much of an overwhelmed dog. They ask way too little of a bratty dog. So this is turning into a long one, guys, but there's a lot of like juicy little tidbits in here. I want more than anything for you guys to take away that your read on the dog is going to inform, or should inform, how you move with the dog, how you dance with that dog, how much pressure you add, when you add it, when you remove it, how many reps you do versus going, you know what I mean, versus few reps, lots of reps, letting the dog sit and simmer more, making sure you don't overwhelm the dog. Or do you have a bratty dog that needs more and more reps so you can push them through a little bit, right? So the overwhelmed dog, you might want to go just a few reps and take it really easy so you don't overwhelm them anymore. And with the bratty dog, you might want to push him further in order to push that attitude, right? Get him out of that space of like entitled, empowered. So that's the challenge, guys. No one said it would be easy. And any of you guys who are out there trying to kind of figure your dogs out, I hope this gives you some information, some fodder to try and kind of better figure out your dog. I'm going to close it out with the same thing that I know I've repeated a few times, but I want you to think about, as you read the dog and as you get good at this, correcting bratty and helping confusion, right? You don't want to correct confusion, and you don't want to help bratty. They'll work against you. The trick is you've got to be able to discern which one is which, and that's where the art comes in. And so that's where feeling the dog, watching the dog, seeing the dog, looking in all the different contexts. What does the dog offer? Is the dog bamboozling you, and is the dog a great poker player, and are you misreading him? Or is the dog not a great poker player and overwhelmed and freaked out, but you aren't reading him right, and so you're pushing a dog that's not able to actually scale the mountain that you want him to scale? So fascinating stuff. The tell, be looking for it. Try to be as sensitive as possible, because it is your compass in dog training. And without it, you will be stuck. Fearful dogs will be stuck. Bratty dogs will be stuck. Overwhelmed dogs will be stuck. And if you can put it together, they won't be. You can work them all through it. And sometimes it's going to be up and down and back and forth, even with ones that you think, wow, you wouldn't want to use higher pressure with a nervous, insecure, fearful dog. Sometimes you might. Sometimes you might. So anyways, I'm going to close it out, let you guys go. Hope this makes some sense. Any questions, hit me up, and I'll be happy to answer it for you guys. All right? Take care. See ya. Bye.